I've been a radiologic technologist at Mercy Hospital for 15 years. I've seen thousands of X-rays, CT scans, and MRIs. I know the difference between imaging artifacts and actual anomalies. What I saw last month wasn't a technical glitch. And I'm not the only one who saw it. It started with John Doe, 27. That's what we called him. An unidentified man found in an alley downtown. No wallet, no ID. Apparent cause of death: exposure. It was January. Temperatures well below freezing for a week straight. The police brought him in for autopsy to rule out foul play. Standard procedure includes imaging before the pathologist begins. So there I was, at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, taking X-rays of a John Doe. Nothing unusual about that. I'd done it hundreds of times before. The body was unremarkable. Male, mid-40s, slight build, no obvious trauma. I positioned him for the chest X-ray, stepped behind my shield, and took the image. When it appeared on my monitor, I almost dropped my coffee. There, hovering about 6 inches above the man's chest, was a distinct shape, a dark mass, roughly rectangular, with wispy edges, like a veil or shroud of black fabric, suspended in mid-air above the corpse. I blinked, rubbed my eyes. The shape remained. I adjusted the contrast, the brightness. Still there. I took another X-ray from a slightly different angle. The shape appeared again, in the same position relative to the body. This wasn't an artifact or a shadow. It had dimension, texture. The edges rippled slightly between images as if moving, though the body hadn't been disturbed. I looked at the actual body on the table. Nothing visible. No cloth, no object, nothing that could explain what I was seeing on the X-ray. Called Dr. Winters, the night shift pathologist. She reviewed the images, her expression growing increasingly troubled. "What am I looking at, Elaine?" she asked, zooming in on the dark shape. "I have no idea," I admitted, "but it's consistent across multiple exposures." Dr. Winters walked over to the body and examined it closely. She passed her hand through the air above the chest where the shape appeared in the X-ray. Nothing. Just empty space. "Take another one while I stand here," she instructed. I did. The shape remained, and Dr. Winters' hand was visible passing through it on the image. Whatever this was, it was only visible on the X-ray, not to the naked eye. "Could be some kind of imaging artifact," she suggested, but I could tell she didn't believe it. Neither did I. I'd been doing this job too long to mistake an artifact for whatever this was. We proceeded with the full imaging protocol: chest, abdomen, head. The shape appeared in every chest image, always in the same position. Nowhere else. Just hovering over the heart. When we switched to CT, things got stranger. The 3D reconstruction showed the shape more clearly. It wasn't just a vague mass. It had form, like a piece of cloth folded and draped with distinct layers and texture, and it was dense, denser than bone on the scan, yet completely invisible to the naked eye. "I've never seen anything like this," Dr. Winters murmured, rotating the image on the screen. "It's as if something is there, but only visible through imaging." We completed the scans and sent the body to the morgue for autopsy in the morning. I volunteered to stay late to process the images, telling Dr. Winters I wanted to rule out equipment malfunction. The truth was, I couldn't tear myself away from that strange, veiled shape. I ran diagnostics on the X-ray machine. Everything checked out. I scanned a test phantom. Perfect image, no anomalies. I even wheeled in another body from the morgue. A known case, an elderly woman who had died of pneumonia. Her images were normal. No floating black veil. It was just John Doe, number 27. I went home at 3 a.m. exhausted but too wired to sleep. I kept seeing that shape when I closed my eyes, like a shroud made of darkness hovering over a dead man's heart. The next morning, I returned early to check the autopsy results. Dr. Kazan, the day shift pathologist, was just finishing up with, "Our John Doe. Anything unusual?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Dr. Kazan looked up, surprised. Elaine? You're not usually interested in the autopsies. I saw something strange on the imaging last night, I explained. Just curious if you found anything that might explain it. He shook his head. Cause of death was hypothermia, as suspected. No surprises. He paused. What did you see on the imaging? I pulled up the files on his computer. The black veil was still there. Unmistakable. Dr. Kazan stared at the screen, then at the now open body on his table. That's not possible, he muttered. There was nothing there when I opened the chest cavity. I know. It's only visible on the images. Dr. Kazan studied the X-rays more closely. This density, it should be a physical object. Something this opaque on an X-ray should be visible, tangible. But it wasn't, I said. No, he agreed. It wasn't. We might have left it at that, a strange, unexplained anomaly, if it hadn't happened again 3 days later. Jane Doe, Treacher 14, apparent overdose victim. Young woman, early 20s. I took the preliminary X-rays and there it was again. The same black veil hovering over her chest. Same position, same density, same impossible presence that couldn't be seen or felt, only imaged. This time I documented everything meticulously. Multiple angles, different machines. Always the same result. I showed Dr. Winters, who had been on duty for the first case as well. 2 in 1 week, she said quietly. That can't be coincidence. What is it? I asked. What are we seeing? She shook her head. I don't know, but I'm going to find out. Over the next month, we identified 5 more cases, all unidentified bodies, all with the black veil visible on their chest X-rays and CT scans, always in the same position, always invisible to the naked eye, always dense as if it were a physical object, though we could pass our hands through the empty air where it appeared on the images. Dr. Winters and I began researching. We found nothing in the medical literature about similar phenomena. We consulted with equipment manufacturers who insisted it must be an artifact or operator error. We even brought in a physicist from the university who specialized in imaging technology. He was baffled. If I didn't know better, he said, examining our images, I'd say you're seeing something that exists in a different spectrum than visible light. Something that interacts with X-rays but not with the photons our eyes detect. Like what? I asked. He shrugged. Nothing I'm familiar with. Nothing that should exist according to physics as we understand it. We kept our investigation quiet. Hospital administration wouldn't appreciate rumors about mysterious black veils appearing on corpses, X-rays. But we documented everything, building a file of cases and images. The breakthrough, if you can call it that, came when we finally identified one of our Jane Does. Her name was Melissa Carter, 24, reported missing 3 weeks earlier. When her parents came to identify the body, I took a chance. After they had completed the formal identification, I approached them in the waiting area. I introduced myself and offered my condolences, then asked a question that had been bothering me since the first case. Did Melissa ever mention seeing shadows? Or feeling like something was watching her? Her mother looked startled. Her father frowned. Why would you ask that? Her mother said. I hesitated. It might be relevant to understanding what happened to her. Her parents exchanged glances. Then her mother spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. She called us the night before we lost her. She was scared. Said she kept seeing a dark shape out of the corner of her eye. Like someone wearing a black veil, she said. Following her. Watching her. Her mother's hands trembled. We thought it was the drugs. She'd been struggling with addiction for years. I felt a chill run through me. Did she describe this shape? This figure? Just that it was like a person draped in black, and that she could only see it when she wasn't looking directly at it. When she turned to face it, it was gone. Her father put his arm around his wife. The police said she took an overdose that night, that she was hallucinating. I thanked them and excused myself, my mind racing. I went straight to Dr. Winters' office and told her what I'd learned. So whatever this is, she said slowly, it was visible to her before death, at least peripherally. And now it's with her, I added. Still there, but only visible through imaging. We pulled the files on our other cases. 2 had been identified since our investigation began. I contacted their families using the pretext of a follow-up study. Both reported similar stories. Their loved ones had mentioned seeing dark shapes, figures in black always at the edge of vision, in the days or weeks before their deaths. What if it's not an artifact? Dr. Winters said one night as we reviewed our growing file of cases. What if it's something attached to them? Like what, a spirit, a ghost? I wasn't sure I believed in such things despite what we were seeing. I don't know. But it's following a pattern. All unidentified when they arrive. All reporting seeing something before death. All with this veil over their hearts. We decided to try something different. The next time a body came in with the black veil visible on X-ray, we set up a special camera, one modified to capture a broader spectrum of light, including near-infrared and ultraviolet. John Doe number 42 arrived on a rainy Tuesday night, male, 30s, cause of death unknown. The X-ray showed the familiar black veil hovering over his chest. We positioned our modified camera and began recording. At first, nothing. Just a body on a table, still and silent. But as we watched the monitor connected to our special camera, something began to take shape. A darkness denser than the shadows around it, forming above the man's chest. Exactly where the veil appeared on the X-ray, the shape moved, shifted, like fabric rippling in a gentle breeze. Then it expanded, growing larger, rising higher above the body, and it turned, toward the camera, toward us. There was no face visible, no features of any kind, just that black veil now oriented in our direction as if looking at us through the camera. Dr. Winters gasped. I felt my blood run cold. The shape contracted suddenly, collapsing back down over the man's chest. Then it was gone, not just from our special camera, but from the X-ray we took immediately after. Nothing. No trace of the black veil. It knows, Dr. Winters whispered. It knows we can see it now. We reviewed the footage obsessively, frame by frame. There was no mistaking what we'd seen. Something had been there. Something shrouded in black, invisible to the naked eye, but briefly captured by our modified camera. And it had reacted to being observed. Since that night, we haven't seen the black veil again. Not on X-rays, not on CT scans, not with our special camera. It's as if it's hiding from us now, aware that we're looking for it. But I still check every corpse that comes through my department. I still look for that distinctive shadow over the heart, and I've started noticing something else. Something I can only see from the corner of my eye when I'm alone in the imaging room late at night. A darkness. A shape draped in black. Standing in the corner, watching me work. When I turn to look, directly at it, it's gone. But I know it's there, waiting, observing. I've started avoiding mirrors and reflective surfaces. Sometimes, just for an instant, I catch a glimpse of something behind me. A dark figure wearing what looks like a black veil. Dr. Winters saw it too last week. She's taking a leave of absence now. Says she needs time away from the hospital. I should do the same, but I can't. I need to understand what this is, what it wants, why it attaches itself to certain people before death, why it lingers after. I've installed one of our modified cameras in my apartment, set it to record continuously. I haven't reviewed the footage yet. I'm afraid of what I might see, but I know it's there. Watching me through a veil I can't quite perceive, waiting for something. And sometimes when I'm drifting off to sleep, I swear I can feel something settling gently over my chest, like a shroud made of darkness slowly descending. I wonder if anyone will notice it on my X-ray when my time comes. Love the story? Show us with a like, hit that subscribe button, and share your scariest idea in the comments. And don't forget to tell us the time and where you're listening from. We want to know where the fear is spreading. The preservation room at the Westfield Historical Society Museum is climate controlled. kept at a precise 68 degrees with 40% humidity. That's where I first saw him, the boy in the glass case who, according to all records, died 134 years ago. Name is Dr. Eleanor Reeves, and I specialize in historical preservation and authentication. When the Westfield Museum contacted me about examining their newest acquisition, a child's body discovered during the renovation of an old church basement, I expected a routine case, mummified remains perhaps, or a body preserved through some natural process like bog preservation. What I found defied all scientific explanation. The boy lay in a temporary display case, awaiting my assessment before permanent installation. He appeared to be around 8 years old, with dark hair neatly combed, wearing a white cotton nightshirt typical of late 19th century children's sleepwear. His hands were folded over his chest, eyes closed as if in peaceful sleep. But this was no mummified corpse or wax figure. The boy's skin was pink with a healthy pallor. His hair was clean and lustrous. His fingernails were perfect, his lips full, and unmarked by decomposition. He looked as if he had fallen asleep moments ago, not over a century in the past. Remarkable preservation work, I commented to Marcus Finley, the museum's curator. Who did the restoration? Marcus looked confused. There was no restoration, Dr. Reeves. This is exactly how he was found. I leaned closer to the glass. That's impossible. No preservation technique from the 1800s could maintain this level of freshness. We thought perhaps it was some unknown embalming method, Marcus offered. That's why we called you. I shook my head. Even the most advanced modern embalming can't prevent all signs of decay. This child looks alive. Except he isn't, Marcus said quietly. And according to the death certificate we found with him, he hasn't been for a very long time. He handed me a folder containing a photocopy of a yellowed document. The original, he explained, was too fragile to handle regularly. It was a death certificate for one Thomas Edwin Blackwood, aged 8 years, dated November 17, 1891. Cause of death, unknown. Time of death, unknown. Unknown cause of death was common back then, I noted. But unknown time? Marcus nodded. The doctor noted that the boy was found in his bed, apparently having passed in his sleep. No signs of illness or injury. The family reported checking on him at 8 p.m. and finding him well. By morning, he was like this. And he's been like this ever since? For 134 years? I couldn't keep the disbelief from my voice. Apparently, the church records indicate the family was told burial would be impossible until decomposition began. They waited and waited. The body never changed. I requested permission to examine the body directly, which Marcus granted after some hesitation. With gloved hands, I carefully inspected the child's remains, looking for any signs of artificial preservation or restoration. There were none. No incisions for embalming, no evidence of chemical treatments, no signs of taxidermy or artificial components. The skin was supple, the joints flexible. If I didn't know better, I would have thought the boy was merely sleeping. I took samples, a tiny snippet of hair, a scraping of skin cells, a cotton fiber from the nightshirt. Under normal circumstances, I would have requested more invasive sampling. But something about this case made me reluctant to disturb the child more than necessary. Back in my lab, the results only deepened the mystery. The hair and skin cells contained intact DNA, impossible for truly ancient remains without special preservation. The cotton fibers showed minimal degradation, consistent with fabric less than a year old, not over a century. Carbon dating provided the first real shock. The results came back inconclusive, with the machine indicating an error. I ran the test again with the same result. It was as if the samples existed outside of normal temporal parameters. I returned to the museum the next day with more sophisticated equipment. I performed a full spectrum analysis, checking for radiation, unusual chemical compounds, anything that might explain the extraordinary preservation. Nothing. By every scientific measure, this child had died recently. Days ago, perhaps. Not over a century before. I need to see where he was found, I told Marcus, and any additional documentation you have. The church basement had been modernized during renovation, but Marcus showed me photographs of the discovery. The boy had been lying in a small alcove behind a false wall, resting on what appeared to be a child's bed, complete with pillow and blanket. No coffin, no preservation chamber, just a hidden room that had remained sealed until construction crews broke through the wall. The additional documentation was sparse. Church records mentioning the sleeping child and the family's despair when burial proved impossible. Notes from the local doctor expressing bewilderment. A letter from the boy's father to the church dated 1893, requesting that his son be hidden away, as the unchanging corpse had become an object of morbid fascination in the small community. One detail caught my attention. The boy had been found with a small wooden box clutched in his left hand. The box was now in the museum's storage room, cataloged but not examined. I asked to see it immediately. The box was simple, hand-carved from dark wood, about 3 inches square. It was sealed shut, with no visible hinges or opening mechanism. When I lifted it, something shifted inside, but the box remained stubbornly closed. "Has anyone tried to open this?" I asked. Marcus shook his head. "We were waiting for your assessment before attempting any invasive procedures." I took the box back to my lab, along with additional samples from the boy's nightshirt. Over the next week, I subjected the box to every non-destructive test I could devise. X-rays, CT scans, ultrasound. The results were bizarre. The scanning equipment showed only static when directed at the box, as if something was interfering with the technology. Meanwhile, I dug deeper into the Blackwood family history. Thomas had been the youngest of 3 children. His father was a clockmaker, his mother a seamstress. By all accounts, they were an ordinary family, until Thomas's inexplicable death. After the boy was sealed away in the church wall, the family left town. They simply disappeared from local records. I traced them to a small village in Maine, then to Boston, then to a ship's manifest bound for England in 1897. After that, nothing, as if they, like their son, had slipped out of normal time. 2 weeks into my investigation, I had a breakthrough, or perhaps a breakdown. I had fallen asleep in my lab, the wooden box on the desk beside me. In my dream, I saw the boy sitting up in his display case, eyes open, staring at me. He held out his hand, asking for the box. I woke with a start to find the box vibrating on my desk, emitting a faint humming sound. As I watched, frozen in shock, a seam appeared around the middle of the box, a seam that hadn't been visible before. The box was opening. Inside was a small mechanical device unlike anything I'd ever seen. It resembled a pocket watch, but with additional components that defied easy categorization. Gears and springs, yes, but also crystalline structures that seemed to pulse with an inner light. The face of the device had no numbers, only concentric circles with various markings, and it was running, ticking, counting something. I called Marcus immediately despite the late hour. "The box is open," I told him. "You need to see this." When he arrived at my lab, his face went pale at the sight of the device. "What is it?" "I don't know," I admitted, "but I think it's related to the boy's condition." We agreed to return to the museum immediately. Something told me we needed to see Thomas again, to check if anything had changed. The museum was dark and silent as Marcus unlocked the side entrance. We made our way to the preservation room, the strange device clutched in my hand, still ticking its unknown count. The boy was gone. The display case was empty, the glass lid pushed aside. No sign of forced entry, no alarm triggered. Thomas Edwin, Blackwood, dead since 1891, had simply vanished. "This is impossible," Marcus whispered. "The security system." But I wasn't listening. Because there, on the floor beside the empty case, was a small piece of paper that hadn't been there before. A note, written in a child's careful script. "Time is not a river, but a circle. Father's work is complete. I return to 1891 to die again. Look for me in 2025. The device in my hand ticked faster, the crystalline components glowing brighter. Then it stopped. Completely. The gears froze, the light faded. When I tried to restart it, the entire mechanism crumbled to dust in my palm. The police investigation found nothing. No evidence of theft. No explanation for how a perfectly preserved body could simply walk out of a secured museum. The security cameras showed static during the critical time period, the same static that had appeared when I tried to scan the wooden box. I've spent the months since then researching Thomas Blackwood's father, the clockmaker. His name was Edwin James Blackwood, and he wasn't just a simple craftsman as I'd initially believed. Before settling in Westfield, he had studied under several prominent physicists in Europe. His notebooks, which I finally located in a university archive, contained theories about the nature of time that were decades ahead of his contemporaries. Blackwood believed that time was not linear, but cyclical. That with the right mechanism, one could create a loop, a closed circle of temporal experience. His later notebooks become increasingly esoteric, mixing physics with mysticism, science with the supernatural. The last entry, dated November 16th, 1891, the day before his son's death, reads simply, "The device is complete. Thomas understands his role. May God forgive me for what I must do to prove my theory correct. I've calculated the cycle based on the note and the original date of death. If Thomas's message is to be believed, he will reappear in November 2025, once again appearing as a perfectly preserved child who died over a century ago. I've requested a sabbatical from my university position. I've rented a small apartment in Westfield. I check the old church site daily, though it's now a community center with no trace of its former hidden alcove. I'm waiting for November 17th, 2025, waiting to meet a boy who has died before, who will die again, who exists in a loop of time created by a father desperate to conquer mortality through the clockwork principles he understood so well. And sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, I swear I can hear it. The soft ticking of a mechanism counting down the moments until Thomas, Edwin Blackwood, returns to begin his cycle once more. The death certificate was right all along. Time of death, unknown. Because how do you record the time of death for someone who dies repeatedly across centuries? Someone caught in the perfect preservation of a temporal loop? I'll be waiting when he returns. To understand, to document, to perhaps finally set him free from his father's terrible, wonderful mechanism. Unless, of course, I'm already part of the cycle too. I never thought I'd be the person telling a story like this. People will say I'm crazy, that the stress of my job finally broke me. Maybe they're right, but I know what I heard that night in the morgue, and it's changed everything. I've been a forensic pathologist for 12 years now. Death doesn't scare me. The human body is just a machine that stopped working, and my job is to figure out why. I've seen everything from car accidents to murders to natural causes. Nothing fazed me. Until 3 weeks ago. It was a Tuesday night. I was working late, catching up on paperwork after finishing an autopsy on a middle-aged woman who died of an apparent heart attack. The morgue was quiet, just the hum of the refrigeration units and the occasional ping from my computer. Normal, peaceful even. The call came in around 11:30 p.m. A body found in an abandoned building, suspected overdose. Nothing unusual for our city. The EMTs brought him in. Male, early 30s, no ID, standard procedure. I signed the intake forms and they wheeled him into the examination room. I remember thinking he looked almost peaceful. No visible trauma, just another sad statistic in our city's growing opioid crisis. I was tired, so I decided to leave the full examination for morning. I just needed to get him processed and stored. As I was filling out the preliminary paperwork, I noticed his fingertips were stained with something dark. Ink, maybe. An artist, perhaps? I made a note to check more, thoroughly, in the morning. I took the standard photos, collected the routine samples, and prepared to move him to refrigeration. That's when it happened. I was alone, standing over the body when I heard it. A whisper, so faint I almost missed it. Sarah. My name. My actual name. I froze, certain I'd imagined it. The ventilation system sometimes made strange sounds. Or maybe I was just overtired. I continued working. Sarah, I've been waiting for you. This time there was no mistaking it. The sound came from the corpse, but his lips didn't move. His chest didn't rise. He was definitely dead. Yet somehow, his voice came from deep within his throat like something else was using his vocal cords. I stumbled backward, knocking over a tray of instruments. The crash echoed through the empty morgue. My heart hammered against my ribs as I stared at the body. It remained still, lifeless. I told myself I was hallucinating from exhaustion. I needed sleep. I quickly finished the intake process, pushed the body into the refrigerator unit, and locked it. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the key. I drove home in a daze, convinced I'd experienced some kind of stress-induced episode. By morning, I'd almost convinced myself it hadn't happened at all. But when I returned to work the next day, things only got stranger. The body was scheduled for my first examination. As I pulled him out of the refrigerator, I noticed something odd. His position had changed slightly, and there was something clutched in his hand that hadn't been there the night before. A small scrap of paper. I carefully removed it with gloved fingers. On it was written an address. My address. My home address that isn't listed anywhere public. My colleague Mark noticed my distress and asked if I was okay. I couldn't tell him the truth. He'd think I was losing my mind. So I claimed I felt sick and asked him to take over the examination. He agreed, and I fled to my office trying to make sense of what was happening. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak in my apartment made me jump. I kept seeing the man's face, hearing that whisper. Around 3 a.m. I gave up and started researching the building where they'd found him. The abandoned structure had once been a research facility for a pharmaceutical company that went bankrupt 15 years ago. There were rumors about unethical experiments, but nothing was ever proven. The building had been empty for years, occasionally used by drug users and the homeless. I dug deeper, searching for any connection to me. And then I found it. My father had worked for that pharmaceutical company before I was born. He rarely spoke about it, just said he left because of ethical disagreements. He died when I was 12, taking whatever secrets he had to his grave. The next morning, I went back to the morgue, determined to examine the body myself. But when I checked the records, I discovered Mark had already completed the autopsy. Cause of death, heroin overdose, as expected. The body was scheduled for release to the county for burial, as no next of kin had been located. I found Mark in the break room. When I asked about the autopsy, his response chilled me. Strangest thing, he said, sipping his coffee. Guy had a tattoo over his heart. Fresh, too. Couldn't have been more than a day old. What was it? I asked, already dreading the answer. Oh, name, Mark said. Sarah. I called in sick for the rest of the week. I couldn't face going back there, couldn't bear the thought of seeing that body again. I spent the time researching my father's work instead, calling old colleagues, digging through his remaining papers. What I discovered was worse than I could have imagined. My father hadn't just worked for the company. He'd led a classified research project, something involving experimental treatments for terminal patients, something that went horribly wrong. And the man on my table? His name was Daniel Mercer. His father had been one of the test subjects who died during my father's experiments. I found an old photo of Daniel as a child, standing beside his father. The resemblance was unmistakable, but how had he found me? How had he known who I was? And how, even in death, had he spoken my name? The night before the county was scheduled to bury him, I went back to the morgue. I had to see him one last time, had to understand what was happening. The building was nearly empty, just a security guard at the front desk who knew me well enough not to question my late-night visit. The morgue was dark and silent as I made my way to the refrigeration units. I found drawer 7, where Daniel's Body was stored and hesitated, my hand on the handle. Part of me wanted to run, to forget everything. But I knew I'd never find peace if I did. I pulled open the drawer. The body was gone. In its place was a folder, old, yellowed with age. Inside were documents from my father's research, pages I'd never seen before. Patient logs, experimental procedures, and photographs, some terrible photographs of what they'd done to those people. On the final page was a handwritten note. "We're coming for you next, Sarah, all of us." I reported the missing body, of course. There was an investigation. Security footage showed no one entering or leaving the morgue that night. The body had simply vanished. They eventually concluded it was some kind of clerical error, that the body had already been transferred for burial, and the paperwork was wrong. But I know better. I've requested a transfer to another hospital. I've changed my locks, installed security cameras. But it won't matter. Sometimes at night I hear whispers coming from the walls, names I recognize from my father's files. And sometimes, when I look in the mirror, I see faces behind me. Gaunt. Angry faces of people I've never met but somehow know. They're waiting for me. And soon I'll be the one on the table. I know how this sounds, but I need someone to believe me. The things I've seen in that morgue aren't natural. I've worked as a morgue attendant for 15 years, and I've never encountered anything like this. I'm not crazy. What I'm about to tell you is the absolute truth. Working nights at County General's morgue was supposed to be the easy job. Quiet, peaceful, just me and the paperwork and the occasional new arrival from the ER upstairs. The dead don't make demands. They don't complain. At least, they're not supposed to. I'd been on night shift for about 6 months when it started. Nothing seemed off at first. The morgue was exactly as you'd expect. Cool, clean, with that distinct smell of disinfectant barely masking the underlying scent of death. 21 refrigerated drawers lined the wall, each numbered and perfectly maintained. The first incident happened on a Tuesday. Dr. Mercer had performed an autopsy on a car accident victim that afternoon. Male, mid-30s, nothing suspicious about the death, standard procedure. The body was placed in drawer 7, paperwork filed, case closed. When I came in for my shift that night, everything seemed normal. I did my rounds, checked the logbook, made sure all the temperatures were correct on the refrigeration units. Nothing out of place. But the next morning, when Dr. Mercer opened drawer 7 to prepare the body for transfer to the funeral home, it wasn't there. In its place was a different corpse entirely. An elderly woman, at least 80 years old, with long gray hair and deeply wrinkled skin. And she was smiling. Not the relaxed expression that sometimes happens with facial muscles after death. A deliberate smile, lips pulled back over yellowed teeth. The paperwork showed no record of her. She wasn't in our system at all. And the accident victim? Simply gone. Dr. Mercer was furious. He assumed someone had made a mistake, mixed up the bodies, misplaced the paperwork. He called a meeting, lectured everyone about protocol, and made us search the entire facility. We never found the missing man. The elderly woman was processed as a Jane Doe. No identification, no matching missing persons reports. Cause of death appeared to be natural causes, though Dr. Mercer noted some unusual tissue characteristics in his report. The body was eventually claimed by the county and cremated. I might have forgotten about it if it hadn't happened again 2 weeks later. This time it was a drowning victim. A teenage girl who'd been pulled from the lake. Drawer 7 again. And the next morning she was gone, replaced by a middle-aged man with leathery skin and that same disturbing smile. No identification, no records. After the third incident, Dr. Mercer installed cameras. They showed nothing. No one entering the morgue, no one tampering with the drawers. The bodies simply changed overnight. Always drawer 7, always replaced with someone older, someone smiling, someone with no identity. The staff started avoiding drawer 7. We'd use any other available space, leaving that one empty whenever possible. But sometimes we had no choice. The morgue would fill up after a busy night at the ER, and drawer 7 would be the only option. I was working the night it happened. To Mr. Peterson. He'd died of a heart attack in the hospital. Nothing unusual except that he was a local councilman, somewhat well known in the community. His autopsy was scheduled for the morning, and yes, he ended up in drawer 7. I felt uneasy the entire shift. Found myself checking the cameras repeatedly, staring at drawer 7 through the monitor. Nothing happened for hours. Until 3:17. The camera feed suddenly filled with static for exactly 12 seconds. When it cleared, I saw the handle on drawer 7 slowly moving, on its own. No one was there, but the handle was turning, the drawer sliding out just an inch before, stopping. I should have called security. I should have called anyone. Instead, I walked over to the drawer. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. With shaking hands, I pulled it open the rest of the way. Mr. Peterson was still there, but he was changing. His skin was darkening, hardening like leather left in the sun, and his mouth, his lips were pulling back, stretching into that horrible smile. His eyes were open now, though they'd definitely been closed earlier. They weren't looking at me. They weren't looking at anything, just staring at the ceiling, glassy and wrong. I slammed the drawer shut and backed away. Spent the rest of my shift in the hallway outside, watching the door. I told myself I was imagining things, that grief does strange things to the mind, that bodies sometimes shift and settle in ways that can seem unnatural. When Dr. Mercer arrived, in the morning and opened drawer 7, Mr. Peterson was gone. In his place was a withered, ancient-looking man with skin like cracked parchment and that same terrible smile. The replacement had a small tattoo on his wrist, a series of numbers that looked decades old. The incident couldn't be hidden this time. Mr. Peterson was prominent enough that his disappearance from the morgue made local news. The hospital administration was in chaos. They brought in investigators, forensic experts, even the FBI. No one could explain what happened. I told them what I'd seen on the camera, what I'd witnessed when I opened the drawer. They reviewed the footage, confirmed the static, the handle moving, but they had no explanation. The official report eventually called it a security breach by person or persons unknown. After that, the hospital sealed drawer 7 permanently, welded it shut. Problem solved, they thought. For a few weeks, everything was normal. Then the noises started. It began as light scratching. Just a faint sound coming from behind the sealed drawer. Easy to dismiss as pipes settling or the refrigeration unit working. But it grew louder, more deliberate. Scratching turned to tapping. Tapping turned to muffled thumping. And then one night I heard a voice. Faint, barely audible, but unmistakably coming from drawer 7. Let me out. I wasn't the only one who heard it. Other staff members reported the same thing. The administration brought in maintenance to check the ventilation system, thinking the sounds must be traveling from elsewhere in the building. They found nothing. The head of pathology finally ordered drawer 7 to be opened, despite the previous decision to seal it. It took maintenance hours to cut through the welding. Inside was nothing. Empty. Not even a shelf. Just a dark, empty space that seemed to go back much further than the actual depth of the refrigeration unit should allow. The maintenance worker shone his flashlight inside and the beam just disappeared into darkness. They sealed it again, more thoroughly this time. Welded it, then installed a metal plate over the entire drawer. The hospital brought in a priest to bless the morgue. Some of the staff laughed about it, but no one complained. The sound stopped after that. For a while, I requested a transfer to day shift and got it. Spent 6 months working normal hours, almost convincing myself that the whole drawer 7 incident had been some kind of mass hallucination or elaborate prank. Then came the night of the hospital fundraiser. I stayed late, helping to set up the pathology department's display for the donor tour the next morning. The morgue was on the tour, sanitized and presentable, of course, with all the drawers firmly closed and nothing disturbing on display. Was alone arranging educational materials on a table when the lights flickered. Just once, a quick dimming and brightening. Then I heard it, a long, slow creak from across the room. Drawer 7 was opening, The metal plate covering it was bending outward, warping impossibly as the drawer slid open inch by inch. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, could only watch as a hand emerged from the darkness inside, gray, withered, with long yellowed nails. It gripped the edge of the drawer and then another hand appeared beside it. Whatever was pulling itself out wasn't human. Not anymore. Its skin was like ancient leather stretched over bone, its limbs too long, too thin. And its face, that horrible wide smile filled with teeth that were sharp and numerous. It saw me, its head turned with a crackling sound and those milky eyes fixed on mine. The smile widened even further. "Your turn," it whispered, voice like dry leaves scraping together. I ran, knocked over displays, slammed through doors, screaming for help. Security found me in the parking lot, hysterical. When they took me back inside after I'd calmed down enough to explain, the morgue was untouched. Drawer 7 was sealed tight, the metal plate unbent, everything in its place. I quit the next day. Couldn't set foot in that building again. Found a new job at a different hospital across town. Tried to put it all behind me. 3 days ago, I received a letter. No return address, no postmark somehow. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 7 words written in spidery handwriting. "Drawer 7 is waiting. It's your turn." Last night I woke to find my bedroom door open, though I always close it before sleeping. And in the darkness of the hallway outside, I saw it. That same horrible smile, those same milky eyes. I'm writing this now because I need someone to know what's happening. The hospital has covered it all up. They've replaced Drawer 7, pretended nothing ever happened. But something is wrong there, something is coming through from somewhere else and it's spreading. If I disappear, look for me in Drawer 7. But don't open it. Whatever you do, don't open Drawer 7. I hear them laughing. Every night at midnight, the dead are laughing beneath the steel slabs, and no one believes me. I've worked in this morgue for 7 years, and I know the difference between building noises and something else. I never wanted to work in a morgue, not really. But when County General offered me the night shift supervisor position at double my previous salary, I couldn't turn it down. Student loans don't pay themselves, and the dead are generally less demanding than living patients. The morgue at County General is in the basement, of course. All morgues are. 3 walls of refrigerated drawers, 4 autopsy tables in the center of the room, and my small office in the corner. Standard setup. The fluorescent lights buzz constantly, and the ventilation system makes those typical old building noises. I got used to all that within my first month. What I couldn't get used to was what happened at midnight. The first time I heard it, I was doing paperwork in my office. A soft, creaking sound from the main room. I assumed it was the building settling, or maybe the refrigeration unit cycling. Old hospitals make all kinds of noises, especially at night. But then I heard something else, something that made me freeze with my pen hovering over the form I was filling out. Giggling. Soft, muffled, but unmistakable. I stepped out of my office and scanned the morgue. Empty, except for the bodies in the drawers, and one on table 3. A car accident victim brought in that afternoon waiting for the medical examiner in the morning. The giggling had stopped, but as I stood there, the autopsy table creaked again. Table 3. The one with the body. I approached slowly, telling myself it was just metal contracting in the cold. The sheet covering the victim was exactly as I'd left it. Nothing moved. Nothing made a sound. I checked the body. Still very much dead. No signs of life, no reason for the table to move or make noise. I went back to my office, leaving the door open. 10 minutes later, right as the clock hit 12:01 a.m., I heard it again. That same muffled giggling, like someone trying not to laugh out. Loud, coming from table 3. I'm not easily spooked. You can't work with the dead and be jumpy. But something about that sound, childlike yet wrong, sent me rushing into the hallway where I stayed until my shift ended, making excuses about needing better Wi-Fi reception. The next night we had no bodies on the tables, just the usual occupants in the refrigerated drawers. Midnight came and went in silence. I convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing or maybe heard sounds from elsewhere in the hospital. Air in the ventilation system can do strange things. 3 nights later, we received 2 bodies. A drowning victim who'd been in the water for days and a fresh one, heart attack, died in the ER just hours earlier. They were placed on tables 1 and 4 respectively. I found myself watching the clock as midnight approached. Way AM exactly. Table 4 creaked. The one with the fresh body. Then came the giggling, slightly louder this time, like whoever was laughing was gaining confidence. I stood in the doorway of my office, staring at the covered form. The sheet moved slightly, just over the chest area, as if the body underneath was shaking with suppressed laughter. "Hello," I called out, immediately feeling foolish. These were dead people. They don't laugh, they don't move. The giggling stopped abruptly. The sheet went still. I approached the table, heart pounding. I had to check to reassure myself. I pulled back the sheet and found exactly what should be there. The peaceful face of an elderly man, eyes closed, skin waxy and pale. Definitely, undeniably dead. I mentioned it to the day shift supervisor the next morning, trying to sound casual. "Hey, have you ever heard any strange noises from the autopsy tables? Like creaking or anything?" He looked at me like I was crazy. "They're stainless steel mounted on concrete. They don't make noise." I didn't mention the giggling. Over the next few weeks, I documented the pattern. It only happened at midnight. It only happened when we had a body on one of the tables, and it was always the freshest corpse that seemed to be the source. The most recently deceased, the one with the least time between death and midnight. I started recording on my phone. The creaking came through clearly, but the giggling was always just at the edge of audibility, like it was being muffled by the sheet or coming from inside the body itself. When I played it for my girlfriend, she said it just sounded like static and metal noises. "You're working too many night shifts," she said. "Your mind is playing tricks on you." Maybe she was right. Maybe isolation and fluorescent lights and too much silence were getting to me. But then came the night that changed everything. A young woman suicide brought in at 11:30 p.m. I helped the transport team move her to table 2, filled out the intake forms, and retreated to my office. I found myself watching the clock, almost expecting what would happen next. Midnight struck. The creaking began louder than ever before. Then the giggling, not muffled this time but clear and high-pitched. A young woman's laugh, but wrong somehow. Too gleeful, too knowing. I stepped out of my office and froze. The sheet over her body was moving. Not subtle tremors like before, but rising and falling as if she were laughing hard, struggling to contain it. The giggling grew louder. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice shaking. "This isn't funny." The laughing stopped. The sheet went still. Then slowly it began to slide off the body, moving as if being pushed from underneath. I should have run. I should have called security. Instead, I stood there, paralyzed, as the sheet slipped to the floor. The body hadn't moved. The young woman lay exactly as she had been placed, arms at her sides, eyes closed. But as I watched, her lips twitched, just slightly, curling at the corners into the beginning of a smile. I backed away, fumbling for my phone to record this, to prove I wasn't crazy. But by the time I had the camera ready, her face was peaceful again. No movement, no smile, no sign of what I'd just witnessed. The next day, I requested camera installation in the morgue. The hospital administrator was reluctant. Budget concerns, but eventually agreed after I made up a story about possible security breaches. The cameras were installed the following week, positioned to cover all 4 autopsy tables. For 3 nights, we had no bodies on the tables. Then came a car crash victim, DOA, placed on table 1 at 7 p.m. I spent the evening watching the camera feed on my computer, waiting for midnight. 9 p.m. I had the live feed open, my eyes glued to the screen. The timestamp ticked over to 12:11 a.m. The camera went black. All 4 feeds, simultaneously. Just static. I rushed into the morgue and heard it, that now familiar giggling, coming from table 1. The sheet was moving, shaking with laughter. I pulled out my phone and started filming. The giggling stopped. The sheet went still. My phone showed nothing unusual, just a covered body on a metal table. The security cameras came back online at 12:01 a.m., showing nothing out of the ordinary. When I checked the recorded footage later, there was just a 1-minute gap, like something had deliberately interfered with the recording. I couldn't keep this to myself anymore. I showed the camera footage with the suspicious gap to Dr. Levine, the head pathologist. He seemed concerned, but not about what I thought. "How long have you been on night shift, Mark?" he asked gently. 7 months, I replied. "And always alone down here?" I nodded. "Isolation can do strange things to the mind," he said. "Maybe we should adjust the schedule, get you some company during those hours." He didn't believe me. No one did. So I took matters into my own hands. I set up my own hidden camera, one that wasn't connected to the hospital system, and I waited. 3 nights later, we received a body at 10 p.m. Elderly female, natural causes. I placed her on table 3 myself, positioned my camera carefully, and retreated to my office to watch the feed on my laptop. Midnight came. The table creaked. The giggling started, and this time I caught it all. The sheet moving as if the body beneath was shaking with laughter. And then, the moment that still haunts me, the sheet slid down just enough to reveal the woman's face. Her eyes were open, staring directly at the camera, and she was smiling, lips pulled back in a grin that no dead person should be able to make. The giggling grew louder as her mouth moved, forming words I couldn't quite make out. I was so shocked I knocked over my coffee mug, the crash startling me back to reality. When I looked back at the screen, everything was normal again. The sheet in place, no movement, but I had the recording. Proof. I showed it to Dr. Levine the next morning. His face went pale as he watched. He called in the hospital administrator, who called in the head of security. They reviewed the footage multiple times, asked me dozens of questions, and finally came to a conclusion. "This is clearly tampered with," the administrator said. "A prank in very poor taste." "I didn't tamper with anything," I protested. "This is exactly what happened." They didn't fire me. That would have been better than what they did. Instead, they mandated psychological evaluation and moved me to day shift filing records, away from the morgue, away from the midnight laughter. But I couldn't let it go. I made copies of the video, tried to get other staff members to watch it. Most refused. Those who did see it either thought it was fake or had some rational explanation. Air escaping from the lungs, muscle contractions, video artifacts. 2 weeks after I was reassigned, a night janitor quit. He wouldn't give a reason, just said he wouldn't go into the morgue anymore. Not at midnight. Not after what he heard. I cornered him in the parking lot, desperate for validation. "You heard it too, didn't you? The laughing?" His eyes widened with recognition and fear. "They're not supposed to do that," he whispered. "The dead aren't supposed to laugh." He drove away and never returned to the hospital. I've been on administrative leave for a month now. Mandatory therapy twice a week. They're concerned about my obsessive behavior and delusional thinking. My girlfriend moved out last week. Said she couldn't handle my fixation on morgue noises. But I know what I heard, what I saw, what I recorded. Last night, I snuck back into the hospital, used my old key card that they forgot to deactivate, made my way down to the morgue just before midnight. Hid in the supply closet with the door cracked open. There was a body on table 4, fresh, brought in that evening according to the intake form. Midnight struck. The table creaked. The giggling began. But this time, something different happened. The sheet moved, sliding completely off the body, onto the floor. The corpse went to a middle-aged man sat up on the table, his head turned, scanning the room, eyes open but cloudy with death. Then he spoke, voice raspy and wrong. "We know you're here. We know you're watching." The giggling grew louder, but it wasn't coming from him. It was coming from the refrigerated drawers, all of them. Dozens of dead people laughing behind their metal doors. The man on the table turned his head toward my hiding spot, smiled, pointed. Your turn soon, he said. The midnight shift is so much more fun on this side. Then he lay back down, pulled the sheet over himself, and went still. The laughing faded. Silence returned to the morgue. I ran, drove home in a panic, packed a bag, left town. I'm writing this from a motel 3 states away, and I still don't feel safe. Because I know now what happens at midnight in that morgue. I know why it's always the freshest corpse that laughs first. They're recruiting. The recently dead are the closest to life, the easiest to reach, to use as messengers. And they've seen me, noticed me, marked me. My phone rang at midnight last night. Unknown number. When I answered, I heard nothing but giggling. The same giggling from the morgue. I don't know how much time I have left. But if you work in a hospital, if you're ever alone in a morgue at midnight, listen carefully. If you hear laughing from beneath the sheet, don't investigate. Don't try to record it. Don't let them know you can hear them. Because once they notice you're next on their list. And I have a feeling that when my time comes, I'll end up on autopsy table 3, laughing at midnight, waiting for the next curious night shift worker to hear me. Thanks for staying with us until the very end. If you enjoyed tonight's chilling tales, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that keep you up at night. Share your favorite part in the comments. We're always watching, and remember, at Nocturnal Narrative Studio, the night never truly ends.